Hello and welcome back to another video. This is Jennifer McGuire and I'm thankful you're here. I am super excited about today's video because I made over 50 cards to give to teachers, and I think teachers need all the praise they can get right now. But I'm also excited because in this video I share a ton of tips and tricks. The main point of the video is to show you how you can do no coloring masking. So basically you're using masking and ink to color images, which can be a huge time saver, especially with simple images, large images, or if you're mass producing. I also share other tips and tricks, including how to get new looks from your stamps by using them creatively and combining them together. So I've got a little bit of something for everyone. I'm using products from many companies today, but most of my focal point images are from Colorado Craft Company. They recently got the rights to use art from an illustrator that is well known. It's Anita Jerem. You can see her illustrations in popular books such as Guess How Much I Love You, and you can see the book here. Her illustrations are so heartwarming, and I am so excited to use them for cards. I also think it's a perfect fit for teacher cards, although you could use them for any occasion. I know the teachers will recognize the illustrator when they get the card. Okay, let's dive into our first set of cards. Now, I will say this is probably the most complicated of all the cards because I use multiple images together. However, I like to start with the hardest and then move on to the easiest. This is also a great example for combining many different sets to get a different look. The first set I'm using is from Colorado Craft Company, and it's called Wishing Happiness, and it has that beautiful illustrator's work. That has lots of sweet images. I'll be using the dog on the bottom. I will also mention at the end of this video additional ideas with some images from this set, so be sure to stay tuned for that. I also am using an image from the Birthday Wishing set. I used that little mouse at the top left, and I'll be using the bunny with the balloon on my next set of cards. So these are all birthday images, but I use them creatively to use them on non-birthday cards. I also pulled out an old favorite of mine, the Reverse Confetti School Days stamp set. I'll be using the apple and the cup of pencils. So by taking a few teacher-themed images from this and combining it with the others, I can change the feel of my main stamps. And then I also used a sentiment from an older Lawn Fawn stamp set. This is called Thanks a Bushel. It's a smaller set, so the price point is great. I used the message, thanks for being a great teacher. Okay, since I'm making many cards, there are a few key products that will help me. One is my Misty stamping tool, which will allow me to mass produce faster, but you could definitely use an acrylic block if you prefer. Also, all of my cards are one-layer cards, so it's very important to use a heavyweight, nice quality cardstock. I'm using Brutus Monroe's Not Your Mama's cardstock. That's the heaviest weight cardstock I ever have used. I also have masking paper. You could use any masking paper you prefer, but I like Gina Masking Magic because it holds up through multiple uses, and I'm making multiple cards. If you do not have Masking Magic, you could use regular masking paper or low tack label sheets and then cover it with clear packing tape, and that helps it to hold up over multiple uses. But Masking Magic really is a great product, and that's what I'll be using throughout today's video. I start my process on this first card by putting one of my note cards into my stamping tool and arranging my images. Once I think I have them arranged where I want, I stamp it. So this is just my guide, my test. And when I did this, I thought I wanted the sentiment to be closer to the dog, but everything else I'm happy with. So this guide will help me to do all of my stamping. I can refer back to it. It saves the guesswork out as I go. Now I'll use the guide to line up several images. To save time, I'm stamping several things at once. So I've lined up the dog. I'll line up the cup of pencils, and then I will put the first part of my sentiment, so just the thanks word. I moved that down and closer to the dog because I didn't like the position of that sentiment, but the guide helped me figure that out. So now on a bunch of note cards, I think I did 12, I'm stamping these images. This is where having a stamping tool is very handy because I can quickly mass produce lots of these. I'm just stamping these with Gina K Amalgam Black ink, which is a great black ink no matter what kind of coloring you want to do. You can use it with Copic markers, inking, watercolor, anything. So I'll continue to stamp these images on lots of white note cards. And by the way, these are 4 1/4 by 5 1/2. Before I remove the dog and the pencil cup image, I'm putting a piece of masking magic into my MISTI. I'm positioning it right against the corner, just like I did with all of my note cards. I'm just stamping this with a light gray ink, but you could use whatever ink you want. Now, when I stamp on this, this will be positioned in the same spot as on my note cards, which will help me to line up my mask later. You don't have to do it this way, but it's definitely helpful. At least I find it is when I'm mass producing. So now I have the dog in the right spot. And on another piece of masking magic here, I'm stamping the little cup. You could have done them on the same piece, but I found it easier to do on 2 different pieces. Now I can remove the dog image and the pencil cup image and move on to other images on the card. I added a little apple to the top of the dog's nose and an additional line of the sentiment. The reason I'm stamping each line of the sentiment separately is that allows me to get the words closer together. If I put all 3 together, they would have been spread out more, and I like the look of them being stacked tight. I'll continue to stamp all of those images on all of my cards. Now it's time to add the mouse, but I first need to mask my pencil cup. So I'm cutting along the bottom edge of the cup here. I don't need to cut out each pencil at this point because the masking or the overlapping is only done towards the bottom. The little mouse's tail will go behind the cup, which you'll see here. I could have positioned the mouse next to the cup so I didn't have to do masking. That would have saved a step, but really this didn't take long at all. Okay, so now that I have the mouse lined up, I can close the door on my MISTI and add my 3rd line of the sentiment. So you can see how each time I stamp as much as I can to save time in the process. I made this first set of note cards in about an hour, hour and a half. Once I've stamped it, I can remove the mask and add the mask onto my next note card and stamp on that. You get into a quick, repetitive process with this, and it really saves a lot of time. Before I move my mouse image, I've got a piece of masking magic in the corner of my MISTI, and I'll stamp the mouse on it. So I have some masks ready to go, all positioned just right. Now you may be wondering why I'm creating a mask for each of these images. The reason is, instead of using markers to color all of these images on all of the cards, I'm using a mask in ink, and it is a huge time saver. Let's start with the dog. I'm using my scissors to fussy cut the dog. This is a pretty basic image to cut out. For this technique, it's best with a basic or large image, or if you like to fussy cut, you can use anything. So I will keep both of the masks here, the mask of the dog and the negative space mask, the outside edge. We'll use both today. I'll set the dog mask aside for later. We're just using the negative space right now. So I'm putting in one of my cards into the corner of the MISTI, and then I will put my mask on top. I only removed half of the release paper. It makes it easier to move the mask from card to card. So I line up the mask in the corner, right on top of the card. I'm putting a piece of tape over here where I cut the mask to start my fussy cutting. You don't have to do that if you don't want to. Next, I'm using a Pink & Mane mini ergonomic blending brush. Any blending tool would do for this. And I have some dye ink. This is Altenew dye ink in Rocky Shore and Milk Chocolate. You could use any dye or pigment ink for this. So for the first one, I'm starting light-handed towards the bottom of my image. I want it to look like there's a highlight towards the top of the dog and then the shadow towards the bottom. So I'll put more ink towards the bottom. This will get easier, just watch. So for the first one, you can see I'm applying the Rocky Shore to cover the dog, and then I'll go a little heavier handed towards the bottom. So instead of coloring this with multiple markers to get a nice shaded look, I'm just using an inking tool, and it makes it so easy. Okay, so once I think I'm happy with the first one, I'll take off the mask. It's easy to lift off of there. And now we can move it on to the next card. I put the card and the mask in the corner of the stamping tool, and then we ink. Now, you could dab if you wanted to. If you dab with a blending brush, it makes it kind of look like fur, look a little textured. So that's another option you can do. Now, the cool thing is, the more of these you do, the less time you have to spend on inking. The reason is, look at my mask. It has ink on it. So each time, if I just pull from the bottom towards the top of the image, I'm dragging that ink along, and it applies the ink heavier towards the bottom and lighter towards the top. So it looks like I took the time to do all that shading, but really I used a mask and an ink and a blending tool. So here you can see how fast this one is. Just drag the ink from the bottom of the image towards the top. Quick and easy. So I'll be doing this technique with many images today, and it saves me a ton of time over doing markers. Next, let's move on to our little mouse here. Now he is harder to cut out because he's tiny, but it's still pretty easy. You could just color this quickly with markers if you prefer, but I wanted to show you it works with small images too. So I put the mask on top of the card there. I'm putting some masking tape up over the top here so I don't accidentally get ink on my note card. So it's just there to block it. This time I'm using Hero Art's soft granite ink, starting towards the bottom of the image and dragging my blending brush towards the top. And that again gives you that shaded look. So I'll continue to do this on all of the cards. And again, it gets faster each time because the ink is already there, it's already on your brush, and you're just putting a small amount down. So you can see cutting out that mask and doing this process is much faster than doing markers or colored pencils or watercolor. Next, let's do the apple. I used a smaller piece of masking paper for this, so you can see you can do it with smaller masks, and I'm just cutting right along the outside edge. I will add tape along the edge because I don't want to accidentally get red ink all over my card. Now this is a cherry red from Gina K Designs, again putting the ink heavier towards the bottom. One of the other advantages of doing this technique is you do not get bleed through to the other side. If I did a lot of Copic blending on these images, then it would probably bleed through to the inside of the card, and I wanted this to be a one layer simple card. So this way the inside stays nice too. Next we can move on to our little cup, our pencil cup. I cut out just the cup itself. I didn't bother cutting out those pencils. I think that would be a pain to cut those out. So I'm just using the mask for the cup, and I'll apply ink over that. This time I'm using Gina K Designs Sea Glass ink. So you'll see I'm using many brands of ink. It really doesn't matter. Distress ink, Distress Oxide ink, dye ink, and pigment inks all would work great here. Now I did do quick coloring with markers for the teeny things, such as the leaf on the apple, the pencils in the cup, and the tail of the mouse. So you can see I'm not using multiple colors, just one color. It won't bleed through because I'm doing quick coloring. And there we have our images all finished. So you can see how using masks on the 4 images really was a time saver. Now you could stop here, but you know me, I'm not good at stopping when I have enough done, so I thought I'd add some color to the ground. So I have a piece of masking magic here that I'm just lining up, so you can see I'm kind of marking where the ground is. Then I'm using our positive images for the dog and the cup and the mouse and overlapping that. So now I can apply ink on the ground. So I decided to use a little bit of gray. So I used the Hero Arts Soft Granite ink. I start on the masking paper and drag the color onto the card. That way I get a soft amount of gray ink. It's darker towards the masked edge and it fades off to white on the bottom. So you could do grass and sky this way, whatever you want. So now I peeled off that mask and it peels off all the individual masks too, and I can move it to the next one. You can see how fast it is to add that little bit of ground using these masks together. Okay, now I did want to also mention, I did a set of cards using some of the same images, but I skipped the mouse and the pencil cup, which was a big time saver. On this example, I did just a little bit of blue ground underneath him, and I wanted to show that to you. So if you wanted a simpler option. So on this one, all I did was the dog, the little apple, and the sentiment. So here I have a mask and I'm just dragging a little blue ink from on the mask to the card, and there is an even simpler design. So I wanted to keep all of these cards one layer, but I wanted to add a little bit of interest to it, so I'm using my Tonic Aqua Shimmer pen to color in just the apple, and that will give it some shimmer. I then put a coat of glossy accents on top of the apple, which will give it a little bit of dimension and some shine, but I didn't add any embellishments to these. By the way, I plan to make cards for all of the teachers at our local school, the virtual teachers and the face-to-face teachers. So this is the beginning of the process for me. So I'll be doing more videos on teacher cards in the future. And I encourage you guys to do the same for your local schools. Even if you don't have students, you can encourage your local schools. We all do better if our schools do well. So spend some time making cards for these folks. They really could use the encouragement. So here's the look at my first set of cards for this video. On the left is the simple version. On the right is where we added the cup and the mouse. You can see the beautiful shine that we get on that apple, and it really makes it stand out by doing that little bit of shimmer and glossy accents. You can also see the quick and easy coloring that we got on our dog, mouse, and cup and apple from using the mask and inking technique. By the way, I did add a dot of Copic marker in R30 to put a little bit of a peach cheek on all of my critters in today's cards. So it's just one quick dot. Other than that, all of the coloring on my critters is done by using mass, ink, and ink blending tools. I need to order some more red envelopes. I'm going to put a red envelope with each of these, and I stamped onto the flap of the envelope a sentiment that says, "Stamped with love." And that is from this PhotoPlay Made by Me stamp set. This has lots of great sentiments to stamp either on the back of your cards or on your envelopes. And so I thought I'd share this. I thought the stamped with love was nice, and I'll use that a few times today. Okay, my next set of cards is probably my favorite from today, and I plan to make more of these to send to other folks, not just teachers. The sending virtual hugs sentiment is perfect for right now. This time I added in some masking with stamped images, so we had a layered look. On this card, I used the Ink Blot Shop's Journaling Spots stamp set. This is a large 6x8 set with lots of images that are fun for little backdrops for main images on your cards. I'll be using the lined paper image. I also used the Waffle Flower Safe at Home stamp set. This is fantastic. Many great messages on here that you can send to just about anyone. And I'll be using Sending Virtual Hugs. This time I got a little lazy and did not stamp a guide to start with, so I just laid my stamps onto a card, and then I closed the door on my MISTI, and that grabbed that top image first, and I could start the stamping with that. So I'm starting with the rabbit image. However, I don't want to stamp a round balloon. I want to make the balloon a heart. So I'm putting a piece of masking paper in my stamping tool so that each time when I stamp this, I don't stamp the balloon part. So I'm stamping the rabbit and the string going up to the balloon. Okay, so let's start our stamping. I stamp once again with black ink, and I do this repeatedly on lots of 4 1/4 by 5.5 inch white note cards. And you can see each time my round balloon is not ending up on the note card. Another way to do this would have been to just ink up the stamp and not ink up the balloon, but having that piece of masking paper up there or scrap paper really makes the process a little faster. Okay, so now it's time to do the heart balloon. I got this heart from the Concord and 9th Simply Said stamp set. I love to look around on different sets that I've had for a while and look for new ways to use them on new cards. And in this case, I thought that heart was a great size for a balloon. So I stamped the heart on each card. Now before I did stamp the rabbit image onto a piece of masking magic, and I will cut it out just as I did before. I'm only cutting out the critter, not the balloon. Again, I'll save both pieces, the critter and the negative space. Let's start with the negative space. Now I noticed that I didn't need that big of a masking magic piece, so I'm cutting off that extra there to save for another projects. Removing the release paper from half of this, I just find it easier to only remove from half. That way it's easier to pick up the mask and move it from project to project. So now I can put the mask and note card into the corner of my stamping tool. Makes it easy to line up very fast. And then I'm applying Hero Art Soft Granite ink. Once again, I put the ink heavier towards the bottom and then lighter towards the top edge where the balloon is. And I can quickly go from card to card to apply this ink. This is a giant time saver in coloring this image. Now, if you wanted to, you could add even darker areas to certain spots of your image. So here on this example, I'm just applying the gray ink on the whole image. But then I had 2 other leftover pieces of masking paper that I just line up here so that I could make this one back ear darker. Then I also did one to make the back hand darker. So I'm just blocking off everything else so I can add a little bit of darker ink to those two areas that are kind of set back. You don't have to do that, but if you wanted to add a little bit of a more shading, you can do it that way. And by the way, I'm only using one ink. You could do multiple colors of ink if you prefer. So off screen, I finished all the critters. Then I created a mask and colored in with ink my heart balloon, and I stamped sending virtual hugs on each. Now I'm using the masks themselves to cover up my critter and my heart balloon. I this time am taking one of those journaling spot stamps, lining it up over our image, and stamping with Gina Sea Glass ink. So this time I'm using the mask in pretty much a traditional way to just mask off our images so we can stamp on top of it. So this is also a time saver for me because if I would have had to die cut all of this, it would have taken a lot of time to do the die cutting and do all the layering. So by doing just the masks, it saves time and I have a 1-layer card. I then went through and added a little R30 Copic marker to the cheeks and ears of our little critter. And then I added shimmer and glossy accents to the balloon. So I think I ended up with about 16 of these cards, but I definitely want to make more. And I think it was fun to take an image that was from a birthday stamp set and use it for something different. It makes it more universal. You can see the shine and sparkle in the balloon, which is, I think, a nice focal point on these simple 1-layer cards. I once again stamped the same Stamped with Love sentiment on the matching envelope for each of these. Okay, here is my next set of cards. This time I did multiple different colors and I made it kind of playful. I did a rainbow of critters going across my card. This features the Colorado Craft Company's Better Together stamp set, which is one of my favorite from this release. I used that large image across the center there and also the sentiment that says we're better together. So I stamped those with black ink on many note cards. You can see them here. And I decided I wanted to stamp a little heart above each of the critters' heads. So I used the Simon Says Stamp Tons of Hearts stamp set. It has lots of outline and solid hearts in different sizes. I use that set a lot. And I did different size outline hearts above each of our critters. Off screen, I stamped the main image on a piece of masking magic and cut out the two hardest to cut out first, the two small images on the left and the right. So you can see I did it pretty basic. I cut off the tail of the little mouse and I'll color that back in later. But I am using the ink blending tool along with Gina Sea Glass Blue and Pinkalicious from Altenew. After adding this color to all of my cards, I went to the largest image, the middle one, and I cut out that rabbit. This time I'm using yellow inks, so I believe I have Buttercream from Altenew. And again, pulling the ink from the bottom towards the top to give a little bit of a shaded look. So far we've done the pink and the blue on the outside edge, and then yellow on the middle. You can see how fast it is to color each of these. I then did cut out the mask for the other two critters and I applied orange ink over one and green over the other. Now I did have the little tails. Remember I cut off the tails and arms of the little mouse here. I just found a marker that was close in color to the ink I used and filled it in very quickly. If you want to add a little bit of shading to some of the images, you can just get a marker of a similar color and you can add that, as I did for the back ear here on, I think that's a little fox. I then quickly added some rose color to all of the hearts. I used R24 for that. I could have done masking, but it just seemed easy enough to use a marker. For a final bit of inking on this card, I cut a mask along the ground of the image and then covered up the tail that was hanging off here. I first did some cards using a green ink. This is Altenew's Bamboo ink. But I decided I didn't want green here. I just felt like it was so much color with all of our colorful critters. So after doing a few in green, I decided to change plans. And for the rest of my cards, I used Rocky Shore from Altenew. So I had like a little bit of a brown ground underneath. So you can change your plans with these masks. You can do whatever you want. You can change different colors for each card if you wanted to. I was just going for as many cards that I could create that are 1-layer and colorful to give to teachers. Now again, I did put some shimmer with a Tonic Aqua shimmer pen and glossy accents onto each of the hearts above the animals. I feel like that makes it stand out a bit more. So here's a look at the final result. You can see I did a little bit of shading doing that no color masking technique, but man, I saved a lot of time by not having to color each of those individually, and I was able to make a bunch of cards. Now I did stamp a silly sentiment on my matching envelope. I decided to go with a Gina K craft envelope for this card. On this envelope is a message from Ink Blot Shop. It says, "Sealed with love, not germs." And it's got a little happy face with a mask on it. Look at this cute set. You can either buy it or get it free over at Ink Blot Shop with a certain purchase for a limited time. But I love these. I think these are so fun to add to envelopes during what we're going through. Okay, my next set of cards actually features a snow stamp set, but I changed it. So this is the Colorado Craft Company Snow Happy stamp set. This is such a beautiful set. And I am using that individual bunny image there at the top with the snowball on my next card. But on this card, I'm using this image on the bottom. And I'm replacing the snowball with an apple. I also used a sentiment from My Favorite Things Biddy Thanks and Gratitude stamp set. I thought the You Are Simply Best would be great for teacher cards. Okay, so I'm planning out where my images will go, and remember I'm replacing the snowball with a tiny little apple image. So I'm placing that there right on top of the snowball. And this is from the Clearly Besotted That's Genius stamp set. So I'm first starting with the apple because we'll have to mask this before we do the other stamping. So I'm stamping this individual apple on many cards. I will also stamp a tiny little mask and cut it out. So I place the mask over my first card. Now I'm placing the other two images on top of that. Now we can stamp each of these, and each time I'll take the mask off of the apple and move it to the next card. So I'm changing this from a snowy scene to a scene of two little critters sharing an apple. And by the way, use tweezers when moving masks from card to card. It really makes it a lot easier to remove and replace. So I stamped all of those, and then I did the masking trick to color in the apple. Now I'm just using a green marker to color in the little leaves on the tree and also on each apple. Very quick to do. So I'm coloring the small, tiny areas with a single marker, but then I'll ink the larger images with a mask. Okay, so now let's color in our deer. Again, I'm using Rocky Shore ink, taking the ink from the bottom and pulling it up so it's a little bit lighter towards the top of our deer. And look how well that colors that. So fast to do. So I'll color all of my deer this way. Then I will cut out the little rabbit and I will color all the rabbits with a light gray ink. So after I did that for all of my cards, I created a mask for the ground, which you see me adding there to my card. Then I'm adding our deer mask and our rabbit mask right back on top of that. So I have one big mask that I can move from card to card so that I can apply green to the ground. So this was a snow image, but by doing green instead, nobody would ever know it was intended to be a snow scene. You can see I also had used a brown marker to color in the tree. I thought using a marker for that would be much easier than doing a mask. So on this one, I did the masking color trick for the deer, the rabbit, the ground, and the apple. I once again used my Shimmer pen and glossy accents on all of the apples. I used that Ink Blot Shop stamp set that's so funny to stamp on the flap of the matching envelope. I just think that's a fun, light-hearted sentiment to use nowadays. And there we have another set of cards that are ready to go to teachers. And look how well that inking worked on that deer and on the little bunny. So fast to do, so much faster than using markers, at least for me. Now before I wrap up the video, I wanted to show you one more set of cards very quickly and then share some additional ideas at the end. For this one, I did a little bit of masking and coloring inside of a die cut. So the dies that I used here I think are brilliant. They're from Sugar Pea Designs. They're called the Open Book Die Set. So it cuts all these pages for a book and then the binding of the book and then other little dies that you can decorate the book with. Well, I just cut the pages from white cardstock and I'm stamping on the top page. And this is the rabbit image from the Snow Happy stamp set. And I did that masking trick once again to make them hold an apple instead of a snowball. I stamped You're Doing Great on the right-hand side from that Waffle Flower stamp set that I showed you earlier. Then I did the same masking trick I did on all of my cards today to do quick coloring of the rabbit, the sky, the ground, and the apple. I then assembled my die cuts and then added it to a note card where I stamped with a light pool ink the Simon Says Stamp You Matter background stamp. So in this case, I didn't do a 1-layer card, but I did use the trick of no color masking to do inking of the coloring instead of actually coloring each of those individual images. So this trick of no color masking that I shared with you today isn't just for 1-layer cards. It's anytime you want to quickly color in a stamped image. I'll be making more of this particular card later today. Okay, before we go, I did want to show you one more stamp set that would be great if you're making teacher cards like me. Now, my order for this set came right after I finished filming all these cards, so I didn't get to use it today, but I'll try to use it in a video soon. This is from Ink Blot Shop, and it has lots of great messages for teachers, including during these challenging times. So if you want to make some teacher cards, get a set like this and use them with any of your other sets, like I did today, to make them perfect for the occasion. Okay, I hope you learned something from all the techniques I squeezed into today's video. If you're interested in the supplies I use, they are linked below in my YouTube description. They're always there. You can also go to my blog for much more information, and that is linked on the top right, and I have photos of all my cards there also. And if you want some more ideas for similar techniques, they're linked here in the middle. Thanks for spending this time with me. Stay safe out there and have a wonderful weekend.